So, hi everyone. Thank you for being here. Welcome. My name's Kim Elena Ionescu. I'm the Chief Sustainability and Knowledge Development Officer here at the Specialty Coffee Association. And this is the second in a series of 4 live discussions that we are having based on the coffee systems map. So I'd like to first of all thank Savor Brands, who's our sponsor for this 4-session series. And perhaps a little bit later, toward the end, we can play a short video of theirs. And if not, then we will attach it to the recording that will go up on the SCA News site once this session is over. Next slide. So a quick housekeeping slide. Those of you who are attending and didn't attend last week, or maybe haven't done an SCA webinar before, mostly we like to ask people to put questions in the question and answer panel, which is in the sidebar of the GoToWebinar screen. You can see there questions and chat, and you have the ability to raise your hand also, but we tend to have technical difficulties with that. So if you put in your question at any point during the webinar, you don't have to wait until the panelists have finished speaking, then I will incorporate those questions and feed those to the panelists as we go. So feel free to direct it to one person or to the entire group. And also, if you would rather I not read your name, because usually it will give a first name attached to it. If you'd rather I not read your first name, then please let me know. The recording, as I just alluded to, of today's conversation will be available at the sca.coffee/news site, also sca.coffee/watch. And usually that happens within about a day or so. It gets emailed out to everyone who registered. So if you have to leave partway through, then don't worry, you will get a copy of the recording in short order. Also, the next webinar in this series will happen next Wednesday at this same time, and we will be talking to people who are involved in importing coffee. Next slide. So I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then I have a couple more things to say before I get to the point where I start asking them questions. But we have Daniel Velasquez with us, who is still trying to connect his camera, fingers crossed, Yuki Minami, and Drew Burnett. Thank you all for being here, and I'm excited to have this conversation today because, as the name for the format alludes to, we're
Did we just lose Kim?
I think so.
I know, I think so.
Should we start by introducing ourselves, maybe? Get that out of the way since Kim already knows who we are.
Let's do that. Why don't we start with you, Drew?
Sure. So, yeah, my name is Drew Burnett. I'm a coffee exporter based in Indonesia. My company, Gudel Indonesia. We're a small independent exporter focused on getting more consistent, higher quality wet hulled coffee out to the international market, along with smaller lots of sort of third wave, sort of competition level coffee that's produced here and yeah, it's great on the local market, but doesn't make it out to the international market too much. We're focused on transparency. We're a middleman, but we seek to add value that exceeds the sort of financial take. And a big way we do that is through working closely with farmers and processors to help them understand the international market, as well as working with buyers to help them understand the Indonesian market. Background on me, I got into coffee through work with international development NGOs and consulting firms. And I continue to do some consulting, some of it focused on coffee market analysis and program design. And then I also do some brokering of containers of mostly certified coffee because my company does not work with that. But maybe, Kim, if you'd like to continue your introduction.
Thank you. No, thank you for jumping in. My go-to webinar quit unexpectedly. So that was fun. But now I'm back, only slightly more nervous than I was a minute ago. Yuki, have you introduced yourself also? We might as well just take this opportunity to do so. Tell us a little bit about your business.
Hello, I'm Yuki Minami from Brazil. I'm a first generation coffee producer, but into export business for 5 years now. My company is called Ectas Coffee, and our mission is connecting producers from our region, the Cerrado Mineiro, to the specialty coffee market, and also promote, apart from promoting connections, it's creating awareness of the quality of the products that they've been producing, and also being a bridge to share knowledge about the production side from producers to, from producers to importers and roasters, and also promote to take knowledge from importers and roasters to producers. Now I'll let Daniel.
Thank you. And see, I was just stalling until Daniel got online. Daniel, could you take a moment and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your business?
Absolutely. Can you guys hear me okay? Cool. My name is Daniel Velasquez with Campesino Coffee. We are exporters based down in Colombia. We have our office in lab in Medellin, and a warehouse, a lab, and a coffee school in Jerico, Antioquia, which is a small town 3 hours outside of Medellin. We are exporters that work directly with the producers. We work with over 140, 150 producers around Colombia. The bulk are in that town of Jerico, and we kind of work as co-ops do. We have purchases every Saturday, buy parchment directly from the farmers, but everything's based on quality. So we cup every bean that we purchase, giving back that information to the farmers, especially if they don't pass that week for whatever reason. We make sure to let them know why, so they can make adjustments. So we could be sure to buy that coffee the following week, whenever that new pickings come out. And we export, working directly with importers and roasters around the globe. And our focus is basically sustainability through specialty coffee, just connecting the farmers with the roasters and kind of acting as that middle actor.
Great, thank you. Well, so shall we try this video again? Okay. All right. So thanks again to Savor Brands, both for the support and for bearing with us as we learn these new technologies. Okay, so now that the panelists have introduced themselves, I'll give just a little bit of background about how we put this panel together, how we got here today. If you are new to this whole systems map idea, which seems unlikely, at this point in our second of these webinars. But if you're looking for more background, then you can find that at the website listed here on the slide. I've done a couple of talks about this for our Expo weekend, and we've written a couple of different articles about it, and so the whole story and the whole background of how this map came to be, you can find there. And because of that, I'm going to sort of skip over how we developed this resource and start to just get into how we use it and really hear from people who are working in one of these activities here on this map, with the aim of better understanding, how the relationships work in practice in different contexts and at different scales. Next slide. So the three panelists here were all identified through our social media networks. Over the past couple of weeks, you might have seen that we have issued calls on Instagram and Twitter for input as to whom to invite to share their perspective. Who does our community want to hear more from, or what kind of stories might we be missing in the typical way of finding panelists, the typical strategies that we use. And so we've gotten more recommendations than we could possibly fit onto even a whole series on exporting panels. But we did reach out to those individuals whose names were suggested to us and asked them for input. So including Yuki, Drew, and Daniel, but also many more people whose responses have helped us to shape today's discussion. It's possible that at some point I will reference what we heard about the connections that exporters have, or the actors to whom they like to be more connected. And when I say that, I'm referencing some of that input that came in via email from around the world. We've got two more of these panels that we are going to do. The next one, as I said earlier, is on importing, and that's next week. And then finally, we have a session on brewing and roasting. So if you think that there's someone that we should absolutely talk to, whether having them on as a panelist or just including their perspective, then please feel free to let us know, either on social media or even in the chat here, and we will reach out to them. Next slide. So these were the questions that once a name was given to us, we reached out with, and we asked people to tell us which actors they feel the most familiar with, which actors, and when I say actors, I'm really talking about people who are on that outer wheel versus the activities that are in the center of the map. Which actors are you least familiar with, and if there are actors you would like to be more connected with. As well as asking in what activities each person is involved. Because again, while this panel is really focused on the exporting experience, it seems increasingly rare that we have anyone in specialty coffee who is really exclusively dedicated to one activity and has no contact or kind of insights into any of the other ones, just due to the evolving nature of this industry and community. So we'll start with those questions, or some sort of variations on them. And then from there, we'll get into questions that you all have. And as I said, this is pretty informal, so no formal PowerPoint presentations. And panelists, feel free to build on each other's answers, or to step in and ask each other questions. And I'm happy to be more of a background moderator. But to kick things off, the first question about which activities are you involved in? I know from all of you that you have experience in other parts of coffee beyond just exporting. And so I wonder, I'll go through and ask each of you some version of this question. But Yuki, in your case, you're a fourth generation coffee producer, but only started exporting coffee comparatively recently. What led you to start Equitas, and to think that there was a gap to be filled there? What drew you to exporting?
Well, what led me to exporting was actually Although I was born in a coffee farm environment, I left my hometown when I was 17 and went back to São Gotardo, where I was born and live. I was already 31. So when I came back here, I wanted to learn more about the coffee production side because I had experienced the specialty coffee market as a consumer. So I realized that we had a really good coffee, but my father used to trade like just as a commodity and through the cooperative. And that fact was one of the experiences that led me to start Ectas, basically looking for a market, the right market for a product with quality. Also past personal experiences, for like learning the specialty coffee scene and being in contact with coffee for more than 10 years. I started to get involved into coffee, led me to start the company because I wanted to connect not only my family's coffee to the international market, but also from other producers, as for them it's harder to travel abroad. There is the language also. So those facts basically led me to start my small export company, Ectas.
Great, thank you. So, you know, I hear you talking about being connected to producers and trying to find markets for the coffee of other producers, not just your family's coffee. And Drew, my rejoining of the webinar coincided with you're talking a little bit about the work that you do, which I know also has a lot to do with production and processing of coffee in Indonesia. And I wonder, you know, are there a lot of exporters or how many exporters are there that do the kind of work that you're doing in Indonesia? And do you feel like that was one of the things, and how did that influence your decision to start exporting coffee?
Yeah, so I came out of the international development world, so very focused on the farming and the small business side of things. And yeah, so through my work with TechnoServe in Ethiopia, I sort of saw this demand gap that you had, there was a demand that was not being met, I think, by existing Indonesian exporters. This was probably 3 or 4 years ago, and I think in the past 3 or 4 years you have had a couple additional ones come on. But yeah, as I got to know the Indonesian coffee production and processing market better and the exporting market here, I started to connect some dots and realized that a lot of the coffee that you see on the international market is actually coming through maybe just 2 or 3 exporters normally. There's some random lots here and there. So yeah, I think it is it's something that's growing here in Indonesia, but it's definitely, I think Indonesia has not yet fully exploited its market opportunity in terms of higher end lots, traceable lots, lots where you have, you know, genuine transparency back to farmers and cooperatives. So yeah, I think that's where it started for me.
Yeah. And Daniel, in Colombia, there is no shortage of specialty exporters. And we've got 3 entrepreneurs here, you know, 3 people who've started exporting companies in the past, you know, 5 or so years. In your case, though, or one thing that's different about your case is that you were an importer first. So what led you, having imported Colombian coffee into the United States, what led you to decide that you wanted to take on exporting also?
My case, my story, my parents are Colombian. I was born and raised in the States. My grandfather was a coffee farmer. And I started with the importing end because I lived in the United States. I actually had a day job in real estate. And on my trips down to Colombia to kind of choose the coffees and cup the coffees that I was going to import through a third-party exporter, I started to notice that there was there was a need for more connectivity between the producer and the roaster. It's just more transparency and a better link to form better relationships. So I started importing in 2013, and 2015 is when I took the decision of moving down to Colombia to really focus on the exporting end. So I did start as an importer. I would say now the main focus is the exporting side directly from Colombia. But what really drew me was that drive to make that connection and kind of, I don't want to say eliminate, but try to make it a little more streamlined. And so that was really the intention with me moving down and starting the exporting side. Once we started exporting, new clients came on board, roasters, importers, just because they were seeking that relationship directly with the producers. So Kim, as you mentioned, there are a lot of boutique exporters down here in Colombia doing a lot of great things. So we're proud and happy to be among them.
Great. Well, I heard you there trying to come up with a way to talk about the role of being in the middle of this this value chain without maybe attaching a value judgment to what it means to be in the middle. And so the next question that we asked you all was about which actors you are most connected to. And one of the things that I think is interesting about the roles of importing and exporting is that, of course, the map graphic that we just had up was too tiny for anyone to be able to see who's connected to whom. But I'll just like give you a hint, or you don't have to pull it up, and I'll just tell you that the importing and exporting roles are more connected than those activities that are further out. So brewing and farming, those activities, people who are in those positions are less connected across the map than those in the middle. And so we got a lot of responses back that reflected that, you know, how many connections there are to all sorts of institutions, financial institutions and brokers, and even the, you know, the Intercontinental Exchange and insurance companies and transport companies. The most common responses were producers and mills and transportation companies. And, you know, I guess as I've been thinking about the three of you as representing different parts of the world, but also companies that are smaller in scale than many of the sort of typical exporting companies in the geographies where you work, I wonder, do you feel like, you know, these connections, producers, transportation companies, mills, does that reflect your experience? And also, when I say that exporting is much more connected than farming or brewing, you know, does that feel right to you, or does that feel like it reflects trading at a really big scale versus exporting at the kind of small scale that you all operate? And I'll lob that one out, and you know, whoever wants to respond to it, jump in, including to tell me I'm wrong.
No, I think that's fair. I think, yeah, I certainly feel connected to most of the categories you talked about. I think, you know, Daniel used the word relationship. Yuki, with her many generations of coffee farming, obviously has strong relationships also. I think I would imagine we all start with very strong relationships and connections to farmers and processors, mills, and yeah, those, I think, in some ways, especially for us being in the producing countries, those are the easy relationships to make in some ways. And then our challenge, and again, going back a bit to why I got into coffee exporting, is that I'm able to, you know, reach out to importers and to coffee roasters and other people on the international market in ways that is more difficult for a lot of Indonesians. So that's sort of, but yeah, I think very much, I feel very much, I'm selling relationships as much as I'm selling coffee. So.
Yeah,
Yes,
you could, Does that resonate
Yeah.
with you, the idea of selling relationships?
Yeah, I would say in our case, we are really connected to the transportation companies, to storage facilities, not really processing, because in Brazil, normally the processing happens in the farm, inside the farm. So also I would add financial institutions for financing the export of coffee, and also producers. We are really connected to producers. We are always receiving their coffee samples and negotiating with them, sharing feedbacks to producers. And in our case, I would add, in my case actually, I would add skilled laborers, because at the farm I'm in charge of giving instructions to the team for harvest, post-harvest processing, and also quality control and traceability. Also, another thing, I don't know if exporters have a relationship with. I guess they do actually. I think it was certifications, because also at the farm I'm responsible for everything related to certifications. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that also links back to the conversation we had last week about coffee production and processing. We spent a fair amount of time talking about certifications and the role that standards and certifications play for producers. So yeah, I'm glad that you noted that, because something like that crosses the entire chain. I think that that the contributions or the ways in which the non-farming actors and activities are involved is sometimes in obtaining or maintaining a certification can be something that we don't discuss as often.
Yeah.
So moving on to the next question about the actors you were least familiar with. I think here a lot of the responses we got were similar to what we heard from farming, which is that there isn't as much connection to the retail side and coffee consumers, that you all are less likely to have those relationships or to have direct relationships there. Although, different to farmers. You mentioned financial institutions, which was another topic we discussed last week as an area that was lacking for a lot of producers, is access to finance. So, with that, who do you all feel like, and maybe Daniel, we'll start with you, who do you feel the least familiar with or the least connected to when you look at this list of different actors?
We, if you will, we're more like of a boutique exporter. So we don't really buy from brokers, if you will. We're more, as I mentioned, streamlined. So we're an exporter, and we work directly with importers or roasters around the globe. So I would say at the moment, brokers are really an actor that we don't work with too much. So essentially, we're buying directly from the producer, exporting directly to the importer, or directly to the roasters. So as far as the list goes, I would say the actor that we're least working with would be brokers.
Yeah, well, you say this, and again, we're talking on a scale that might be different from some of certainly the larger scale exporting companies that exist in coffee and have existed for a long time. When we look at this as a systems map, these large entities are absolutely part of the system, and in some ways kind of contributed to creating this system. And one of the questions that we got from an audience member, Timothy, was about this boutique sort of element or the boutique nature of a lot of specialty importing and exporting at present, and how this has changed over time. So, so Timothy asks, what challenges and opportunities do you find with the small volumes along the lines of finance, administration, logistics, etc.? And how do you navigate those farmers or producers who are producing coffee below the level of your quality threshold? What happens to this coffee? That's actually like 4 questions in one. So feel free to respond to any of them, you know, Daniel, Drew, or Yuki.
I'll start out. As I mentioned, as like a smaller exporter, it has been a challenge for us as far as financing. So we grew from doing 1-2 containers a year to duplicating that and reaching higher volumes. But with that comes the fact that we're a newer company, so financial institutions aren't as eager to lend us money. So definitely for the first couple of years, it was mom, dad, sisters, aunts, uncles putting in money to be able to finance our operation. As we've been growing, now banks are starting to pay attention to us and willing to offer loans. Granted, they're loans at really high interest rates, but they're starting to come down as we've been proving ourselves as a viable company. But that was one, and it still is one of our greatest challenges, is the financing part. So in aspects of the financial institutions, yeah, it's been a challenge for us, for sure.
Yeah.
Drew, I saw you nodding.
I think access to finance is far and away the biggest challenge, and that's so yeah, that's, you know, really another big area where I see myself as adding value. I would say actually access to finance in rural areas in Indonesia is comparatively quite good as compared to a lot of producing countries. But when I say that, I mean that a coffee processor can pretty easily secure maybe a $20,000 or $30,000 loan from Indonesian banks in their area. But of course, the problem is if you're exporting coffee, you're almost always doing that by container load, and a container of coffee is generally worth a bit more than $30,000. So you need somebody who can find access to additional capital. So I think one big issue that we have is the access. Well, we were able to overcome the access to the scale of capital, but then, as Daniel was mentioning, the interest rates for us as a smaller business they're pretty rough, and because of some work I've done, you know, I know the big exporters with international, you know, connections to international banks, they're borrowing at maybe 6 to 8% for their working capital, whereas, well, and then you have some social lenders that will do maybe 8 to 10% usually. But then for us as a small commercial enterprise, our first loans were at 18%. They're now down to 14%. And coffee, of course, is well, buyers are price sensitive, and so when you're paying as much as you are in interest charges, that really pulls a lot of value out of the price of the coffee. So it makes it hard to be competitive.
If I can jump in, we were starting out with bank rates of like 28% interest rates. That was our first bank loan from here. So it's gone down, but that hurt.
Yeah, I would say that in our case, it's really similar, the financial thing of exporting. Also, I would add, as we connect producers to the market, we have a really high level of customization. So this is the main difficulty, because we cannot have scale for that. Because sometimes we will export like a lot of one bag up to full container load. And I think the challenges are the financial risk, because we pay producer in advance before exporting. So if we have any quality issue, actors will have to observe that. Also, I think another challenge that I would like to mention is the question from Timothy, I think, which is finding a home for lower scored coffees. Ecta's work on like really top specialty coffee, like 85 and above. So this is something that I would like to work with roasters and importers to find a home for lower scored coffees, because there isn't a farm that will produce 100% 85, 86, 87 up scores. So we really need to, as a producer, I know that this is a reality, that we have to find other channels or other partners to find a home for those coffees.
Yeah. I want to, you mentioned customization, which I think is something that will be familiar probably to specialty coffee, whatever, the specialty coffee audience on this webinar, regardless of what role they hold. And it's a little bit of a tangent, but both thinking about customization and also thinking about finding a home for those 85-point scoring coffees. What role has COVID played in this? What sort of changes have you seen? Are there any opportunities here to change some of these dynamics that are so challenging for specialty exporters, or do you think that that things are just going to get harder?
Fully loaded question. Based on for our operation, kind of like Yuki, we were more like of a 84 plus coffees. This is basically what we focus on. But as of COVID, there's been a lot more demand for your more 82, 83 coffees, usually used as blenders or dark roast. But we've seen an increase in demand for those coffees. As far as the specialty stuff, those have maintained interest. I wouldn't say there's been a decrease in that demand, but personally for our business, and I was thinking about this a lot last night and this past week, as to why our operation may be very different from the larger exporters or from our other peers, but our operation has seen an increase definitely with those excelsos or those 82, 83 blender coffees. As to where things are going with COVID, I think there's even more uncertainty than there was maybe in April, now with the second waves coming and whatnot. But I think those blender coffees are going to stay strong. I think home consumption has really gone up, obviously. So those home consumers are, if they're high-end users, they're going to be looking for those geishas and those pink bourbones. But I would say the majority of people are sipping on those 82, 83 coffees. So I think all around for us, I think there's just been an increase in demand for all coffees, whether they're the high end or whether they're the blender coffees. I don't know if Yuki and Drew are seeing differences in their clients' demands.
I don't. In our case, we haven't. We are not exporting like 82, 83 coffee. I think what I've seen for the last few years that there's an increase in demand for even higher quality coffees. Every year the market wants like higher quality, and then the challenge really is finding a home for the lower 84 and lower score than 84. And in our case, we are really facing a challenge this year because we have a sales reduction from 30 to 50%. There are importers that are not buying, other importers that are in the same level, same amount of coffee as last year. And also, I think as we're not having those big coffee events, it really affected the business, because it's where we establish those connections. And specialty coffee, in specialty coffee, the face-to-face contact is really important for starting new relationships.
Yeah, I mean, I know that a lot of people feel that, feel that loss of an opportunity to connect, to do business as well as connect just for, reasons of socializing and continued education and professional development. I think that could be a little bit of a segue to the last of these three questions that we sent to you all ahead of the discussion about where you would like to be more connected. And that could be any of the actors on this list. And then also I will note that this systems map, this first version of it, there are a lot of actors, there are, subcategories in each one of these little circles that that represents a real plurality that couldn't possibly fit on a diagram like this. So if you want to go outside of this list, then feel free to. But I wonder about some of these connections that you wish you had, especially if things are changing and becoming more difficult. Do you think that is that well understood? Is there a role for or further awareness raising that could be achieved if you, as an exporter, had a different set of connections?
I'll jump in. One actor here that I wish we had better access to would be certifications. I feel like the certifications, and I could be wrong, maybe I haven't done enough research, but we are in the process of reaching out to different certifications. It's hard for smaller actors, smaller exporters to have access or to be able to certify our producer partners. I feel like the certifications are more equipped for the larger exporters or the larger co-ops. A lot of our clients are looking for those rainforests or those pre-trade coffees, which, we have a pool of farmers that we would love to be able to get certified, but the process, for example, for organic is a 3-year minimum process. For rainforests, where we're in the process of trying to get certified and whatnot, but it's a lengthy process that I wish was a little more streamlined or a little more user-friendly for smaller exporters. But that's one actor that I wish we had easier access to, or at least maybe a little more guidance to be able to get certified or get our producers certified. So that's one big challenge for us.
Yeah, I kind of feel like there aren't necessarily any of these in particular that I want to be more connected to. I just wish that elements of the industry operated a bit differently, which would make those services perhaps more useful to us. So my company doesn't deal with certified coffee, and yeah, a big part of that is because it is not really well suited. The startup costs for getting a supply chain certified are more than we're able to invest in that at this point. There are better ways for us to invest. I think, and this kind of goes to I think one effect of COVID has been that people have, really concentrated on existing relationships, which I think is great in principle, but as somebody who's trying to build more relationships, it makes it difficult. And then also for Indonesia, of course, has a bit of a reputation problem in the higher end coffee market. So a lot of the work that I've been doing has actually been going in the markets where we haven't had as much luck, and in terms of getting coffee to initially, that's been a matter of going and building relationships directly with roasters to sort of stoke demand for the coffee that we can offer. So I think those are, roasters and coffee drinkers, sort of people at the consumption end, to sort of, get around importing bottlenecks.
Yeah. When both of you were talking, Drew and Daniel, I thought about the, not only the, as you said, Drew, the sort of connection being there, but more like how it works or having a shared understanding of something. I think that there are many different understandings when it comes to something like a certification, whether it's the value of that certification, the rigor of the certification, you know, there are many different interpretations that that exist out there, even in a single supply chain between different actors of what that means, and then of course what the value is of it, and then value relates to the costs that are incurred in obtaining it, or the value in marketing it, whether the consumer recognizes it. And one of the questions that we got, actually, Drew, right after your introduction was about traceability. So Stephanie asked, with regard to Drew's comments on traceability, can he or any of the panelists detail further how to build more traceability in the market, and what are the main challenges and their experience to having complete traceability? Which I'll just say I think is an interesting question for a group of exporters, because in times of yore, let's say, I think that there was probably a common perception or narrative in many specialty coffee circles about exporters being a barrier to traceability, or one of those bottlenecks. So yeah, would you all talk a little bit about the role of traceability?
I would like to start. I think in our case, we deliver 100% traceability because we simply take offers from producers and ship them to importers, and importers ship to roasters that already have relationship with producers. So we, when we buy the coffee, we buy directly from the producer, and we have everything, all of our internal processes traced. We have traceability from the farm to the warehouse, and from the warehouse to the importer. So we have invoices that can attest the traceability. We don't blend any lot unless we receive an instruction from the importer or even the roaster. But unfortunately, we don't have the technology to showcase the traceability, but this is a basic value at Actas, one of our principles. I don't know what else I could add to traceability. I think we deliver traceability. This is something that it's our core value.
Is it challenging? I think that was another aspect of the question, is does this feel like maybe less challenging because you've built it into your business, as opposed to trying to add it on many years into the and after having created a model? Or yeah, is it something that you feel like is challenging and understood?
It can be challenging, because if we wanted, we could like just mix many lots from many producers and create a standard and simply offer like a full container load, 85 coffee, and then we shouldn't have to say from where it comes from. But every bag, every single coffee bag has the producer's name, and also we did a blog post about that the coffee has the producer's name. Every single bag will have his name, the farm's name, the varietal, processing, and other relevant information requested by the importer or the roaster.
For us, we, as I mentioned, we have a warehouse which acts as a buying point, where the farmers can go with their parchment, and we'll buy it based on quality on the cupping. We produce, if you will, a blend coffee. It's a community coffee. So with those 140 farmers that we work with, we'll create this blend called Madre Laura. This blend at any given time can have 60, 70, 80 farmers involved in that blend. So if we're sending out a container of this community coffee, Madre Laura, we provide a full transparency report that shows every farmer that goes into that blend, the percentage or kilos that is incorporated in that blend. So we offer full transparency, and that might be just a little bit easier for us because we do have that warehouse where we can log in every bean that comes in, and we can kind of put it aside. Okay, this coffee is going to go as a micro lot, or this coffee is going to go as a nano lot or natural, or this coffee is going to go as the Madre Laura community blend. So for us, we've been able to get that down pat. We've been able to create that transparency straight from the purchase of the parchment all the way to the export. So we've been able to get that done, but again, we have that warehouse where it really facilitates that process.
Yeah, I think traceability is, I would agree that generally speaking, it is at the importer and exporter level where, well, so yeah, I think traditionally exporters have been not so keen on traceability because traceability is hard. And so if you're working at a large scale, then it's hard to keep track of where every coffee bean came in from. I think there are, so for the three of us working on a smaller scale, I think that makes it a bit easier. But at the same time, I think a lot of, well, so my company, we've been rolling out a digital traceability system. So we similarly work with blended lots. Some things are from a specific processor and from a specific, and according to a specific process. But a lot of the coffee that we export is just sort of a higher quality wet hulled coffee, the standard sort of Sumatran profile. So what we've been doing, and this coffee is grown on it's smallholder farmers, and it's a smallholder farmer who has definitely less than 1.5 hectares of land, sometimes less than half a hectare of land, selling to a collector who's then selling to the processor that we're working with. So it takes really strong relationships to even convince people to start considering, sort of adopting new systems that even if in the long run it'll make it easier for them, it's still learning something new and everybody's comfortable with how things are going for the most part. But yeah, I think it's, with digital traceability tools becoming more readily available, I think it's something that is going to start becoming more common. And in fact, my company is never going to be a huge exporter, but part of what we want to do with this digital traceability system is actually be a catalyst to adoption of similar systems for the big exporters, because ultimately when coffee isn't traceable, if you don't know where the coffee comes from, you don't know if it's grown responsibly or sustainably or whatever you want to use. So I think traceability is something that those of us who are small can really focus on and do it in a trust-based system, as I think has traditionally been done with traceable coffee. But yeah, I think it'll get easier and easier to do in more robust ways.
Yeah, you all, as you were talking, Drew, I was thinking about competitive advantage as being something that none of you said that, but it seems to me like a kind of common thread that I see at the scale that you all operate and the way that you talk about traceability. Not that it's easy, but that it's something that's worth it, for a challenge that's worth undertaking in all of your cases, because it's something that at your scale you're able to do. We got another question, which might be my favorite so far. I don't know, haven't read through all of them probably, but about the relationships that you all have as exporters with producers. And the question is about, from Monica, about the role of producers in price establishment, if there is one, and then says, I'm asking this as this financial side has a big impact on the connectivity of exporters and producers. So, I wonder if any of you can speak at all to the relationships that you have with producers and whether or not they have a role in price establishment.
I can start. A role as in, I don't know if you can be a little more clear, I guess, as their role, or if their role would be producing a better quality coffee. We really base our pricing. We use the market price as a base, but from there we go up based on the cleanliness of the coffee and the scoring of the coffee. Our feedback always to the producers are, you know, if we can work together to increase the quality, or why not, hey, your wash coffee is coming out awesome. Why don't we look at maybe doing a natural or a honey, or doing a prolonged fermentation? Our clients, our roaster clients, our importer clients are all about that. Finding a coffee that they love, that could be a wash coffee, and working with that producer. Hey, producer, we want your coffee, but we want it as a natural, or we want it as a honey. So that's an opportunity for the producer to increase their return, and for us to be able to, you know, increase the quality of their coffee or offer a different variation. And that at the end is gonna be a win-win for everybody. It's gonna be better pay for the farmer, better quality coffee for the roaster, and obviously the roaster is gonna be able to sell that at a better cost, us too. So it's really across the board, it's gonna be a win-win. So as far as the question, if I'm understanding it correctly, I think the role that the farmer has is to be able to be able to listen and understand, and be able to work with us to do different variations of their coffee to increase the quality. So
yeah, I could probably frame that better by saying that one of the reasons I like the question is because it's not something that I have run across very often, you know, and the answer might be that I haven't run across the question because that doesn't really happen very often, and it could be a something to, you know, like there could be value there, but that the complexity of it at present and the other pressures and demands might make it so that it stays in that aspirational category. So anyway, all that to say, the answer could be no, that doesn't really happen so much.
I think the producer is the most important person to how can I say a word? I forgot the word in English to explain that. I think, but when producer is aware of the product that they have been producing, they can question the price establishment. And this is something that we encourage producers to do. They have to know about the quality of the coffees that they've been producing. We provide them feedback, not only our own feedback, but feedback from importers as well. So even if the producer has coffee that it's scoring, let's say 85 or 84, and if the coffee was produced in a whole different way, like different processing, like by using experiments and really labor-intensive, lot, he can request another price. And this is something that normally we have this kind of situation. It's based on cup score, but also there is a whole context. So when the producer share with us the whole story of how he produced that lot, we understand that, and we transmit that to the importer or to the roaster, that there is a reason for that price. And also I think that by learning their own product, this is how they can look for better results for their own product, their own coffee. I think that this is something that we really stimulate producers to take an active role, not only be a price taker and complain about the market price. But if you want to earn a better price, you have to know what the product that you've been producing. And also we always try to stimulate producers to improve quality year after year by giving quality control feedbacks. And sometimes we identify some defects that could be avoided if they have done if they do some adjustments during post-harvest processing.
Yeah, Yuki, I hear you, both you and Daniel, talking about strategies that you all can use as exporters or that producers can use to increase the value of their coffee or of your coffee, and that includes, you know, quality, but also I think it's powerful what you said about you know, access to information and education and sort of becoming more cognizant of those factors that will be considered and judged, and you know what the market is looking for, and how the what attributes a producer's coffee has, and that's something that that I see as really having changed, at least in my time in coffee. And there's a long way to go, but between, you know, technology and a lot of technology, but buying trends and the growth of specialty coffee, I think that that there is more available information-wise, sometimes confusing signals, but then there would have been a generation ago. So that was a big kind of conceptual question, and I love those. But I also love when questions are very tangible from people who want to talk to, you know, someone who's in this business about something that is probably a big part of your life and a very small part of mine as a you know, sustainability officer at a trade association. So the next question I'll ask all of you is from Hani, who asks, do you have any challenges with storage facilities, as it is quite crucial for the quality of the coffees? Daniel, you mentioned storage, yeah, in your facility earlier. So I know that you have confidence in yours.
Well, we have confidence in ours. We store everything in Grain Pro, and usually the coffee is not in the warehouse for more than a month and a half, 2 months before it's going to the dry mill for export. Colombia may be different from Brazil and Indonesia. Colombia, there's always coffee. We have 2 harvests a year, one large one and one small one, and in between the harvests, there's even coffee. So, so as far as storage, again, we're not storing for too long, and everything's in Grain Pro. But storage is a big issue, obviously, especially if, you know, obviously it's a big investment. Buying parchment is basically like having cash in your warehouse, because that parchment can be sold at any second. So if you're not storing correctly, that coffee can go bad within 2 or 3 weeks. That's why for us it's so important to make sure that we're buying coffee that's within the humidity levels that it needs to be, because the risk is huge. If you're not storing properly, you can have 85, 86 coffee that in a month and a half is tasting like cardboard, and you're out of luck. So for us, storage is huge. It's very risky factor, and something that we focus a lot on.
Yeah, so everything we do, we don't have a large warehouse in Medan as many of the exporters in Indonesia do. We work with the processors that we've partnered with, and yeah, we've definitely made some investments in their storage and in their drying to make sure that there are not issues, because the tremendous risk.
Yes, for us, we use the cooperative storage facility. I'm a member at this cooperative, but we use the storage there to like keep the coffee for 1.5 months maximum, and our quality control is always there to check if everything is okay, and check from unloading the coffee to loading the coffee to the container. We are there to keep the traceability records, and also during the whole process when the coffee is being prepared for export. But of course, that it could be a challenging issue, because we do not have a warehouse that demands a really high investment, we're not all the time controlling the process. So it could be a potential risk. But we trust their work.
Yeah. Okay, and then I think we have time for about one more question. This one just came in a second ago, and it seems like a good one to end on because you know, it maybe connects the past experiences that you all have had and the history of exporting and importing, but also it gives a chance to set a hope for the future. So Dylan asks, what invention or innovation has greatly improved the exporter / importer, you can focus on exporting if you want to, value addition over the past 50 years, other than Grain Pro and containerization? You could take a second to think about that one. Obviously, as always, there are no right or wrong answers here. But if something occurs to you about a way in which the exporting business has changed for the better, yeah, I'll leave it to you all to fill that in, and then I have some thoughts of my own on this one.
Well, I think that what export has improved for the better, I think that simply by the existence of entrepreneurs like Daniel, Drew, and many others. I think that a few decades ago, all the coffee export business was done by few big trading companies. But I don't know what I could say about innovation, like the innovation thing. But I think that the simple fact that we have the small independent exporting companies are like an answer to the way that the coffee market is established.
I'm going to piggyback on what Yuki said. I agree. There's speaking for Colombia. Let's say maybe 10 years ago, there was just a handful of large exporters. We weren't really even able to export without a huge amount of different letters and whatnot. But to export naturals or special processes or coffees that are not traditional washed, those were really hard or close to impossible to export 10 years ago from Colombia. It wasn't until, I don't know, maybe 7 or 6 years ago where they changed some guidelines where now you can export special processes without having to get a letter from the roaster or a letter from the importer and jump through hoops. Now it's a lot more streamlined. So it makes it a lot easier for smaller importers, for us, exporters like us, to work more directly with farmers and be able to operate. Before it was going against these monster companies, and it just made it very difficult. So again, to follow what Yuki was saying, I think the ability for smaller exporters to get up and running and have more access to farmers across the country has been something that's increased a lot in the past 5-6 years here in Colombia.
Yeah, and I would say not specific to coffee, but just obviously communication innovations and the ability for, you know, us to be simultaneously texting with farmers and with importers and with roasters, you know, being able to send photos and, you know, even do videos to each other, like that's, I think that enables so much better communication, and it allows us and it allows responsible exporters to share information at a level that I think would have been unimaginable 50 years ago. So.
Yeah, I totally agree with Drew. This is really innovating thing, and especially when we are working with such level of customizations with few producers and like really different processing and experiments. When you have a way to communicate that with pictures and videos, that adds a lot to the export, import, and even roaster side.
Yeah, for me, at the risk of overthinking the word choice in here about invention and innovation, you know, I think about just the rise of specialty coffee in general, and especially of you know, the sort of recent generations, movements, waves, whatever you choose to call them. That so often I think that that innovation is thought of as being like a moment or a person who does it. And probably if we're talking about the third wave or direct trade, it would be the roaster who would get the credit as the innovator or inventor. But you know, if we can think of that as starting with an idea or a conversation about like, wouldn't it be great if we could separate just this one farm's coffee, just like this one lot, and get this from the farm all the way to the roasting facility, so it wasn't blended with the coffee from, you know, 2,000 other farmers and we didn't lose it? What if we could just keep this separate? Then, you know, I wonder, is that the moment of innovation, or is it like, what kind of recognition goes to the people who actually said, okay, this is going to be costly and it's going to require some different logistics, and but we can figure it out, you know, like, you give us a little bit of time and it might cost a little bit more money, but I think we can do this, and we'll figure out how to do this. And that all the people, including exporters and importers, but also, you know, producers and processors and everyone else, transportation companies, who made that kind of work possible, that is now so closely identified with the identity of specialty coffee, I feel like they have some role in that innovation too, you know. So it would be hard for me to say that it was the exporters that did that innovation, but it would also be hard for me, you know, to say that it was any individual activity doer or actor in this system who kind of made it possible to have coffee on the retail shelf in a very different way than it had been as recently as, you know, 20 years ago.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's everyone in the coffee value chain has their participation to make a specialty coffee unique from the farm to the cup. Because even if when we're talking about exporting, when we have those documents, like, let's say that I have a container with 5 different lots. Every lot has to be written, identified in the document. So sometimes the customs broker mistype a name or a code, and we have to ask them to correct. So yeah, every person is important to the specialty coffee chain.
I think that's a good note to end on, and thank you for that, Yuki. Thank you all for being here, Drew, Danielle, for sharing your perspectives and experiences with the SCA and with these all these audience members. So just to wrap it up again, I want to thank Savor Brands. We've got another one of these coming up next week, same time. You can register to attend. Keep sending us your suggestions for who we should talk to and hear from. And yeah, with that, be well, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.